Hey guys, let's talk about regret. I'm about 60 years old enough that I can look back on the decades of my life in retrospect and examine the things that I did, the things I didn't do, and have a bit of regret over some of the passage of my life. Now, as I say this, I want to preface it by saying that I've had a good life. I have had a lot of fun. I've enjoyed a whole lot of opportunities. And I'm super grateful for those things I've been able to experience and do and participate in. And if I had the chance to do it all over again, I'd probably do it all over again. But with the passage of time, it gives you some perspective, and I can look back on the decades of my life and have a few regrets. I see each of the decades of my life as a chapter. And each of those chapters had their own character to them. And they were amazing and a lot of fun to go through. And one thing that I regret was the inability to really have a proper understanding of time. And I think this may just simply be a human condition. A fish doesn't know too much about water because it's in it, and so it is as we swim through our lives. When I was young, and I was maybe 18, 20 years old, I was full of energy, full of ambition, full of idealistic ideas. And as I looked ahead in my life from that perspective, at 18, 20 years old, I'd see people in their 30s and think, those are adults and I'm not there yet. I got a long ways to go to be there. And people in their 50s, that was over the horizon. I couldn't even really truly imagine myself that old. And I thought, if I make it that far, well, here I am, well past that point. And you don't realize how quickly the time passes. The weeks and the days might go by at an excruciatingly slow pace, but the decades seem to flash by. And I remember those times clearly. And so in my 20s, I had a great time, and the years clicked by rapidly to 22, 25, 27, and next thing I knew, I was in my 30s, looking back. And I don't feel like I've changed very much. I think I'm still the same person I was back then, but with perhaps just a little more caution and maybe a touch more wisdom. And the 30s were a vibrant time where I had lots of success and lots of money, lots of opportunity for romantic entanglements, which I routinely set aside, saying, I can't afford that. I could afford it monetarily, but in terms of drama, no thanks. I focused on my career, my business. I traveled the world. It was an exciting time. When I was in my 30s, I would look at people in their 50s and 60s and think, those people are old. And I'm smarter and faster and more capable than those guys, and I'm going to win this race. Sure enough, the years click by, and next thing I know, I'm 35, 38, 42. Kind of got into the groove in the 40s, and didn't have quite the same level of ambition, had a bit more quiet focus. And things start slowing down just a little bit. I became a little more careful about doing risky things with my body. And in my late 40s, I started losing a little bit of hair, and that's a wake-up call. At the age of about 49, I decided that if I'm going to lose some hair, I'm going to hang on to the hair that I got. I'm not going to cut it anymore. And so I followed the path of those Eastern yogis who don't cut their hair. And I figured hair's got a purpose. And I probably shouldn't be just cutting it off. And so I haven't cut my hair since. And then about that time, I was making pretty good money, but I was engaged in some really stressful work. And I decided that that path just didn't fulfill me spiritually. And so I walked away from all of it. And I've lived much poorer ever since, but more satisfied. And I don't regret any of this stuff. I do sometimes question the way things would have gone had I gone in a different direction. And that's one of the things about regret, is that there's really no point in regretting things because you don't know. Life is like walking down a corridor with doorways, and you can choose which doorways you want to walk through, but whichever one you walk through takes you on a different path. And so if I had done this rather than doing that, who knows how things would have turned out? We can project a glorious future if I'd taken a different path, but that's all just mere speculation and projection. It could have turned out great. It could have turned out miserable. You just don't know. You take your best shot, given the information that you know. Now, over the years, I've done some stupid things, done some illegal things, and I'm glad that through those processes, I've had some temperament, and I didn't do anything that got myself hurt too badly, didn't get myself into serious legal trouble. That was part wisdom and part luck. And I always avoided doing things which I felt could be damaging to somebody else. I guess a moral compass, which I'm glad that I followed throughout my life, and I don't regret following that. There are some things that I regret when I strayed away from that. For example, one thing I remember from my childhood, and of course it's been many decades and I still remember this episode, was a friend of mine, acquaintance of mine, was just trying to get a rouse out of me. He was bugging me. He was like poking at me and poking at me. And I said, "Hey, bud, don't poke at me, okay? Please." He kept poking at me. And so once again, I said, "Hey, I don't appreciate it. Don't do that." But he kept it up. And then without further warning, I just hauled around and punched him in the face pretty hard. And he was shocked. He was shocked at the reaction. And I regret that move. It was an overreaction. I should have handled that better. So one of the things I regret is not treating people with dignity when I had the choice to do so. And one of the things I'm happy with is that for the most part through my life, the path of treating people as I'd like to be treated by others is the one that I followed. And so that's one of the things that I regret, is not treating people as well as I should have. Overall, though, the things that I regret aren't the things that I've done. It's the things that I contemplated, maybe wished I had done, but chose not to do. Maybe those are places where I didn't really listen to that gut feeling, that quiet inner voice, which almost always seems to know the right path to go on. So that's a lesson, which is, if your gut is telling you should do this, should consider this, maybe you should listen to it. And you shouldn't always go with that necessarily, but you should give it proper weighting when you're making your decisions, because more times than not, that gut feeling knows what it's talking about. A couple of things that I didn't do that I wish I had done was back in junior high school. There was this girl that I was pretty enamored with. I think the feeling was sort of mutual. And she invited me out, but I declined. And I declined not because I didn't want to hang out with her. I thought she was something else. I would have really have liked to have pursued that. But I did because of fear. If I had pursued it, what would have happened? We probably would have gotten together. And that would have ran its course for a short time, and we would have gone our separate ways, and the story would have been concluded. Or maybe she would have said thanks, but no thanks. And that would have been a crushing defeat. And I didn't want to have a crushing defeat, so I didn't want to take the risk of having a crushing defeat. Now, of course, that defeat would have only lasted probably a week or two, and I would have gone on with my life. But instead, I chose to do nothing. I declined her invitation. I admired her from afar. And I sometimes wonder, what would have happened? What could have happened? I'll never know. Of course, that wasn't a huge impact on my life. I went on to lead a perfectly successful, normal life ever since. And so it's not a huge stumbling block, but it is just one little thing that makes you think, what would have happened if I had followed my gut, had the courage to fail, and take a shot at it? Another episode came years later when I was working for this company, and I was one of the rising stars of our department. And one day my supervisor calls me in, and he sits me down and says, I've got news. I'm going to be leaving the company. And I was surprised. I was shocked. I was saying, wow, I'm sorry to hear that. It's been great working for you. And I hope you have a good opportunity that you're going to. And he says, yep, I've got a better opportunity, so I'm going to take that. And it's been great working with you and the guys here. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be stepping out of this position. Okay. And then he says, so I'm considering who to tap as my successor to this position. And what do you think of this other person in our department? Do you think they'd be a good leader? And I said, yeah, I think they'd be a great leader. I've always enjoyed working with them. I've got no complaints. I think they make good decisions. They work well with our customers. And sure, if you think that's the good choice, I'd endorse that. And then he turned to me and says, well, unless, of course, you think you'd do a better job, would you like to take this role? I think he was looking for me to make an argument that I should take the lead. And I was honored by that. I considered it for a brief moment. And I declined. And the reason I declined was because I was living out of state at the time. And I felt like I wouldn't be in a good position to effectively lead the department unless I was boots on the ground in the department. I didn't feel like I could be a strong advocate for our group with upper management if I wasn't actually working in the building. And so, mostly because of my remote location and the fact that I was pretty comfortable where I was, I didn't want to move, I chose to decline the offer. There was also some office politics involved, which was I felt like our group was a great group, and I really liked our company, but the layer of management directly above our group I thought was a little dicey, and did I really want to engage with all that? Didn't sound like a whole lot of fun. So, with all of these factors involved, I thought, I think I'll pass on this opportunity, but I was honored that it was offered. And I knew better, because one of the lessons that I've learned is that when you're offered a promotional opportunity, you really should take it. And if you don't take it, oftentimes that's the beginning of the end of your career. And so it was for me. To my surprise, this person who I had recommended for this position, who I had endorsed, got the position. And fairly soon thereafter seemed to not be very supportive of me. I don't know if they felt like I was a threat to their ascension to power or what, but they started suggesting that perhaps I wasn't the team player that I was. And, well, the company went through some transitions, and the company eventually put itself out of business due to some of its management practices. But before that happened, there was a series of layoffs, and I got impacted by that. Could I have navigated that situation better if I had taken that position? Yeah, I think I could have. But all in all, I can't say that I have complete regret over it, because it sent me down a different pathway, which was fascinating and interesting and presented a lot of opportunities for me. But the lesson here is that be bold and take those opportunities if your gut tells you that it might be interesting, might be something you should do. We oftentimes think that there will always be a second chance. There will always be another day, another year. We look at our lives and say, hey, I'm 35 years old. I've got my whole life ahead of me. There's no rush. Well, those days might click by slowly, but the years pass by quickly. And you find yourself looking back at 45, 48, 55, and realizing of how much stuff that you've missed because you hesitated and you didn't capitalize on those opportunities when they presented themselves. And so one of the things that I've learned is to say yes more often to invitations, because that's the opportunity to experience new things and grow and be able to capitalize on the opportunities as they present themselves. I used to say no to most invitations, and I still tend to be that way, but I do try to say yes more often if my gut tells me it might be fun, might be interesting. So, one of the great regrets is not realizing how short life really is. Looking back at this age, it seems like it all happened just mere moments ago. And back then, it seemed like I had endless opportunities and endless time, and that's not the case. You've only got a handful of short years to live life in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, and each of these chapters are amazing and fabulous in their own way, and you gain opportunities at each of these chapters in life, but you also lose opportunities in each of those chapters in life. I remember at the age of 24, getting ready to go out, and I'm looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, and I'm kind of like checking out every little feature, and half joking, but half serious, looking at myself going, man, dude, this is as good as it's gonna get. And it's true. So enjoy your time. Enjoy every sandwich. Be grateful for what you have. Love the people around you, because everything in your life is fleeting. And eventually, you're going to lose it all. I think of life as a trajectory, where the first part of life is learning the lessons of abundance. Opportunities come to you, and you have to decide which opportunities to take and capitalize on, and which ones may not be a good choice for you. You're offered the opportunity to do dangerous and thrilling things, the opportunity to party with drugs and alcohol, the opportunity to make social connections, some of which could really elevate you and some of which could drag you down. And these are all big decisions, and they all have, well, some pluses and some minuses, and they forge the trajectory of your life. And it's easy to fly off center and crash and grab abundance without thought of the future impact. And it takes some willpower to decline those things that are reckless and fun, but may derail your progress for more stability and future gains. And then in the back half of your life, you get to watch everything slowly fade away from you. And the quality of the decisions that you made in the first half of your life can certainly impact the trajectory of the latter part of your life. And so the first half, you're dealing with those lessons of abundance and gain and managing fame and fortune and not flying off center and crashing. The second half of your life are the lessons of loss and grace and handling the decline in a way that benefits you best it can, and to be grateful for what you have and what you had. It's difficult sometimes to look back on the decades of your life and see things that you were once proficient at and skilled at and able to do so easily. And now as an older person, you just don't have those abilities anymore. And you can cherish the thoughts of your previous accomplishments and have some pride of self in the things that you've done, with the humility of knowing that, well, that time has passed and that's a young man's game, and now it's time for you to move on to the next chapter. There's a lot of physical things that I would do when I was younger, climbing up on ladders and towers, getting up in precarious positions, taking risks with high power, that these days I'm a lot more cautious about. Now, I've done some dumb things in my life. I've taken some risks, and those are not the things that I regret. I look back at them with some amusement, some humor, but the things that really cause me regret are the things that I didn't do, that I wonder how it would have turned out had I gone in that direction. So, be safe, be kind, and be bold with your life. That's my advice. That's what works for me. So here I am at 60 years old. And I can tell you that at the age of 20 or 30, 40, I would have had no clue that I'd be sitting here talking to you on this YouTube channel. That would have been the furthest thing from my mind. So you don't know what's coming next. Enjoy your life. Appreciate the value of each of the decades in your life and understand that time is fleeting and the opportunities may be fewer than you think. So when an opportunity presents itself that inspires you, that your gut is telling you, this might be interesting, lean towards saying yes rather than no. And I felt so often that there'll be other opportunities, there'll be plenty of time. And sometimes there were, but oftentimes there wasn't. You never know if a particular opportunity is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And so, pursue your dreams, pursue your passions. Have a good time. And remember that attitude is contagious. So, as much as possible, focus on the positive, spread the love, be optimistic and engaging. And that actually helps make the world a better place. So I hope that you have a path in life that has been as enjoyable and rewarding as mine, and that some of these things that I say maybe resonate with you. hopefully it's a reminder to pursue those things that'll bring you future pleasure. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed the video, consider throwing me a thumbs up. I'd like that. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. That makes it easier to find next time. Thanks for watching the video. I appreciate it. And hopefully, I'll catch you again soon.